a seat. So now we come to the next part of our evening, which is the spicy Torah part. And it's all been spicy Torah. But anyone seen the show Hot Ones? And I say this every time, and there's like one or two people seeing it. So in this show, it's an interview show. And they have different like levels of hot wings that you eat, and you have to answer questions during it. So we're going to bring up the hot wings. No, I'm kidding. We don't have that. But what we're going to do is I'm going to ask Tracey questions from kind of mild, and there are 4 questions that go from mild to ghost pepper spicy. That's the idea. It's not going to be ghost pepper spicy.
It's the wrong holiday for 4 questions, Rabbi.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. Well, it's like Passover all the time, I guess. But we are coming up to Passover, so I know everyone's be quiet. Okay. All right. So first off, I just want to say how incredible that presentation was, looking at the book of Esther in different ways, and that idea of, that we don't drown out those horrific scenes. So thank you for sharing that Torah with us. I want to take a step back and talk about your own journey. Kind of how did you get to where you are now in Keshet? And then also your relationship to Judaism. How has it evolved over the years?
Yeah, I need a prop. Hold on, I have a prop to get. I forgot. Okay. So I grew up in a really small town in the suburbs of Boston before the internet. And there were no out Jews in my orbit. I didn't know that you could be a lesbian and be Jewish. Like, I didn't think that was possible. And I really thought I had to choose. And my Judaism was familial. It was tangible. It was safe. It was literally right in front of me. And so I hid my queer identity for a really long time. It was not healthy or good for anyone. But when I learned about Keshet, so Keshet was founded in Boston 30 years ago, like not so far down the road from where I grew up, but 2 years after I left for college. And so it wasn't there, and I didn't know that, just the idea of an organization that was explicitly founded to like fight for the right of LGBTQ plus Jews in Jewish spaces is just mind-blowing to me that it even exists, even though I've worked here for 4.5 years now. And so it is an absolute honor and a privilege to get to do this work. I know as a kid, right, there was no internet, so I needed to find community at home, even if I didn't feel like that community represented all the parts of me. These days, anyone can find community any time of day, anywhere in the world. And if we don't have spaces that reflect back to our community members their own identities, we're going to lose people. And so knowing that this work ensures, one could say, a deep bench, or Lador Vador, right? Like, is really powerful and meaningful to me. My Jewish upbringing, my parents were among the founding families of a Reform synagogue in the suburbs of in Wayland, Massachusetts. Shir Tikva, if any of you have been there. It's very small. I mean, the synagogue is now big. The town is small. My mom had a rule that, like, I wasn't allowed. This is a very small town with not a very large Jewish population. She didn't want me to have any non-Jewish friends. So, like, in the 4th grade, there was this girl, Fran, who had really pretty long hair. And looking back on it, I probably had a crush on Fran. I don't think I understood that then. But one day, Fran invited me over, and for sure, I was going to go to have a play date at Fran's house because she was really cute. And my mom picked me up from Fran's house, and on the car on the ride home was like, yeah, no, you can never have another play date with Fran again, right? Fran wasn't Jewish. I have no idea where Fran is now. She moved, and I haven't seen her in 45 years. But anyway, my point is, my mom was very strict about us only, like, staying in the Jewish community. But, and I love my mom. Some of you might know her, so, like, maybe we'll just keep this story in the room. But, like, she also, there was no formal Jewish education. My religious school How many of you have read Sarah Hurwitz's first book or heard Sarah Hurwitz talk about her? Okay, Sarah Hurwitz was a speechwriter for Michelle Obama, and she's written 2 books. Her first book is about how she grew up in a religious school that taught her nothing. Sarah Hurwitz and I went to the same religious school. She's had a whole career now on how her religious school taught her nothing. So I had to learn for myself. I had to teach myself. I had to understand what it was that my mom thought was so compelling that I had to believe in it so much, but I had no formal education. So at age 13, like any normal person, I read the Tanakh in translation from cover to cover. That's terrifying now if you look back on it. At the time, I was like, oh yeah, there's some good stuff in here. I'm good. I can do this Jewish thing. Crazy to me now, having studied more. But anyway, so so I've been on a journey of trying to fill in the gaps for over the many years.
Wow, I don't think I've read the Tanakh from cover to cover, so maybe I should start.
I didn't have a lot of friends.
Yeah, so now we're gonna kind of up the spice level a little bit. So Tracey talked about a little bit about, characters in the Tanakh or Jewish tradition. You talked about David and Jonathan. You talked about Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Not everyone knows these stories, but what I wanted to find out was maybe your favorite queer Jewish biblical or rabbinic hero or heroine, whatever, or I don't know what the gender, if there's a...
I think hero.
Hero. Yeah, and then also the next question is just in general, your Jewish LGBTQ hero.
Yeah, so there are too many to pick. So I decided, since this is Spicy Torah, I'm gonna go on my own direction with this question. So and this is where you see that I don't have a formal Jewish education. When the second temple fell, when the Jews were exiled, right, and the rabbis, there was no longer, you couldn't go to the temple to make sacrifices anymore, the second temple, right? Couldn't make sacrifices in the temple anymore. The Jews had to figure out how they were going to observe Judaism, because all of the ways that we were doing it up until that point were not available to us anymore. And so a group of rabbis, who I believe are some of the writers of the Talmud, right, began to invent ways to practice Judaism, which involved liturgy and ritual and synagogue and led us to where we are now. So I think those rabbis were pretty queer. They had to take a situation that they had never experienced before and figure out what they were going to do with it. I didn't come to this idea on my own. If you're not familiar with Rabbi B'nai Lappi, I totally just stole that from her. Rabbi B'nai Lappi is the founder of Svara, which is called the Radically Queer Yeshiva. And the idea behind Svara is to re-examine text and halacha from an LGBTQ plus and trans, particularly, perspective. Rabbi Lappi has a TED Talk. It's fantastic, and she describes this third way theory of, it's called the crash, right? So the temple falls, it's a crash. There's a big upset in the way you understand things, and how do you react? So there's you try to keep everything the way it was before, even if you can't. You totally deny and leave and walk away. Or the third way is you reinvent a new, beautiful way, which has become our Jewish practice for millennia since then. Another thing that Rabbi Lappi also talks about is the donkey theory. So if you're not familiar with the donkey theory, it's the idea that when we read the Torah, we notice the stories that are most like us, or we recognize the patterns and that conform to the way we understand the world. Those are that's the telling of the Purim story by celebrating Esther by speaking up and saving the Jews, right? That's how we would read the story. The donkey theory says, actually, if you're a donkey, you're going to notice all the other donkeys in the Torah, and there's a lot of donkeys in the Torah, and they all have a really different perspective on how everything shakes out. And so when you look at Torah or text from a different perspective, a different angle, it is a reminder to remember all the other voices that we're not hearing. So that is Rabbi B'nai Lappi. I can send the TED Talk around. The other question you asked is, a queer Jewish hero, there are many that I have, and I spent a little time thinking about which one I want to talk about, but somebody I've been thinking a lot about lately is Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld. I always want to say Field. It's Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld. If you're not familiar with Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld, he was a gay Jew living in pre-war Berlin. He was a sexologist. He had an institute of sexology, think like Dr. Ruth, but like 1930s Berlin. And he would provide a space where LGBTQ, but particularly transgender people in the late 20s, early 30s in Berlin could go and be in community with other transgender people. He provided doctors there who could do gender-affirming surgeries. He did a ton of research about trans identity. He was not a saint. This is a time period where eugenics were really popular, and he did believe in some eugenic theories, so we don't lift him up to the pinnacle of amazingness, but he was a man ahead of his time, and the work that he was doing was absolutely incredible. And the first really large-scale Nazi book burning that they did was the library at his Institute of Sexology, because as a gay Jewish man, he was thought to be the pinnacle of anti-Nazi ideology. Yes, it was depicted in Transparent. There's also an incredible book that I am obsessed with, a historical fiction novel that just came out called The Lilac People that also tells this story. There's also a couple of documentaries about him. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. That was incredible. I did see the Transparent thing. Actually, it's a really good episode. Speaking about this idea of things crashing, kind of realities crash. You talk about the Second Temple and this idea of like the basic, their reality changed and it's not going to go back. And so what do you do? So that is very much, I think, if we can think about a moment in our lives, it would probably be October 7th, 2023. And in the gay Jewish community or the gay community, there's been obviously a lot going on with Israel, anti-Israel, anti-Semitism. And so I was wondering if you could give your perspective, one, as a Jewish professional in the queer world, how you have navigated the tensions over these last 2.5 years, 3 years, yeah.
So living in South Florida, it's kind of, what do we say down here? That
like a
we're
bubble.
just like Tel Aviv, only more Zionist. So living in South Florida, I don't think that the tensions are as prevalent as they might be in other parts of the country. My answer to a question like that is always that Jewish people are not a monolith, and LGBTQ people are not a monolith either. And so when they say, like, what, some number of Jews and 3 times many more than that opinions, it's also true of the LGBTQ plus community. And so I was giving a talk last week, actually, and I made a joke that I thought was good and I could use here, I guess. You tell me if it was good. That I didn't know which community was more diverse, right? The Jewish community or the LGBTQ plus community. And so, and then you add them together, right? The Jewish LGBTQ plus community, forget about it, right? So I think that there are definitely a range of opinions about Israel and Zionism in the world right now. Some of these have been pinned particularly to certain members of the LGBTQ plus community, but I'd love to broaden the scope of that and think about when a country we love dearly makes choices we don't agree with. We still hopefully love that country. Maybe we don't love its government. Maybe we get out there and motivate to make changes and think critically about how we make things better. And when a country we love dearly is under attack, we also need to protect it. And we need to be really thoughtful about the ways that we handle all those things and the way that we message them and the way that we treat other people and the way that we think about the communities that are existing in those places, whether that be this country or the other country we love dearly, Israel.
Have you received any, pushback? You went to Israel, and even just saying I'm a left-wing Zionist is, kind of crosses boundaries in some ways? Like, have you had any experience with that over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I have. This happened in 1 week. These two things happened in 1 week. There's a secular LGBTQ plus organization in South Florida that does incredible work. They're secular, non-Jewish, LGBTQ plus organization in South Florida doing really, really incredible work. Their CEO, executive director, I don't know the title, was posting on his personal social media, not the social media of the organization, but his personal social media, some pretty virulently anti-Zionist, I would say anti-Semitic things. And that was right after October 7th. And since then, I have been introduced to and done some work with a staff member at that organization who's not the same person, who's absolutely lovely and like really wants to do community engagement work and really wants to do work between our organizations. And we had to navigate that a little bit. What is that like when your person posts this, I don't know if they realize that that has an impact, on me and my community and the communities I serve and the work that I do. At the same week that I had that conversation, I received an email, a phone call. This is a little convoluted, follow me here for a second. There is somebody who lives in the vicinity of us who is the friend of a major donor to a Jewish federation. So the friend, who is the friend, calls the major donor to the federation and says, I know you like Keshet. Have you seen their website? They're anti-Zionist, they don't like Israel, they don't like the Jews. And what is this proof? That in 2021, Keshet, or a LGBTQ Jewish organization, gave an award to Abby Stein, who is was a Hasidic rabbi, came out as transgender, and she's an activist on a lot of things, but you may have heard her speak. She wrote a book called Becoming Eve. She, since October 7th, has also come out as pretty anti-Zionist. 2021 was before October 7th. We gave her an award for her bravery and her courage in leaving her Hasidic community and honoring her true self. But this was the piece of information that informed the friend of this donor that he should no longer contribute to Keshet nor support that federation's work with Keshet because clearly we were anti-Zionist. And so I just tell you these two anecdotes because I think sometimes we get super fired up about something that one person says or one person does instead of looking sort of at the bigger picture of how we can find the ways to learn from each other, to be in deep, meaningful conversation, to share how these things impact us, to talk with each other, and to do good together in the world.
All right, last question, but you kind of addressed it, so I'm just going to pull something a little bit. I'm going to change it a little bit. Looking at you've talked about what's going on in Florida, nationwide as well. What do you think the Jewish community should be doing that they're not already doing? And this could be on a national level, it could be on a local level, like whatever, however you want to answer that question.
I'm in this space, like deep, right? So I spend all day long, every day, paying very, very close attention to the attacks on the LGBTQ plus community that are happening in this country. And then I go and I talk to people who don't realize that this is happening. And it's hard for me to fathom, like I can't imagine why this isn't the number one thing that's on everyone's minds, right? It reminds me, winter break of 2023, I don't have the same rule as my mom. My kids are allowed to have non-Jewish friends. They went and visited some non-Jewish friends that don't live in the state, were visiting their grandparents in Naples. My kids went for the couple days to visit the friends, and they came home and they said, Mom, the kids had never heard of October 7th. And my kids' minds were completely blown. Because how could you not know that? And so for me, when I encounter people who aren't completely riled up about the state of anti-transgender legislation in this country, I'm like, how? How can you not care? But it's not necessarily that you don't care. It might be that you just don't know. So over 1,000 anti-LGBTQ plus bills were introduced at the state and federal level in 2025. Over 1,000. 26 states enacted anti-LGBTQ plus bills last year. 26 states. This past week, the state of Idaho, the state house in Idaho, passed a bill, has not been voted on by the Senate yet, but it is likely to pass in the Senate as well, saying that transgender people can no longer not just use public bathrooms, right? We've already done that. Now, private businesses cannot allow transgender people to use their bathrooms. Yeah, first of all, it's like not even constitutional. But, so, right? Because now there's bounties. Yeah. There's bounty. If you turn somebody in, or if you question somebody, or if your business allows this to happen and somebody finds out, then you, right? So when we think about, and I know this is a really dangerous thing to say out loud, and I apologize for saying it, but when we think about like the Nuremberg era of Germany, and as we slowly took away rights, and we wondered where everyone else was, this is a moment we are in. And so to me, as Jews, this should be like the thing that we are watching, because we know where it leads. And you know what's really interesting? In the transgender community, the metaphor that they use all the time, canary in a coal mine. Canary in a coal mine. Because we often use it about ourselves.